You know, Russ, I'm sorry I didn't get you any vodka back there.
That's okay. Well, you could pick up some on the way back. Wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of that.
That's an antlion, Russell.
That's an antlion?
Yes. So you do know what antlions are.
Yes, they're leggies.
In some of our early experiments bringing Half-Life 2 enemies to VR, we found that antlions in particular showed promise and were interesting to fight, but tended to quickly overwhelm playtesters. They were able to get into the player's physical space too quickly, and applied so much pressure that players just ended up endlessly teleporting around trying to get away. Around the same time, we were discovering that all players, even relative novices, have surprisingly good aim in VR. The variability of aiming ability amongst players is simply much lower in VR than it is in mouse and keyboard games. To take advantage of the idea that players would consistently be able to make precise shots, we started testing an antlion design which players could slow down by shooting off the legs. Playtesters reacted positively to both the need for accuracy and the organic feeling that this gave the antlions when their legs flew off and the injured antlion continued to limp toward them. The removal of the legs was clear to players, but presenting the fact that the abdomen was invulnerable until the legs were removed was a long-standing challenge. There was no single solution to communicating this effectively to playtesters, but rather a series of small additions that communicated the behavior. For example, we made the abdomen dull and black when invulnerable, and changed it to match the bright orange legs as it became vulnerable. Shooting armored parts of the antlion would generate sparks and hard ricochet sounds, while shooting the vulnerable body parts resulted in orange blood spurts and soft impact sounds. We also designed the death animations to emphasize the abdomen exploding, and ensured that an exploded abdomen chunk was left behind after the antlion was dead.
Left. 3 left. Last cell. Out of cells. Three shells left. left. I'm out. Hey, any news on the data pod?
Your dad's head's down. He's working on it. He's got to be close.
Great.
All of the foliage in the game animates in response to player touch and environmental wind conditions. The foliage animation is entirely procedural and is computed on the graphics processor using vertex shader deformation. A voxel field that travels with the player's body is used to track the location of the player's hands in space. The hands effectively draw motion trails into this voxel field, which can be sampled by the foliage's vertex shader and used to drive deformations, allowing the player to bat the foliage around with their hands. The foliage also interacts with wind, allowing us to give ambient motion to the plants. In order to accommodate a range of environmental design, we tuned the wind deformations at different speeds, from slight drafts to hurricane force winds. It turned out, though, that the ambient wind was never required to be more than a moderate breeze, and for most of development, the hurricane effect was unused. This particular zoo habitat was added late in development and required a critical extension to the procedural foliage animation system. Prior to adding this habitat, the foliage didn't need to deform in response to enemy animation or grenade explosions, but of course, this area is all about throwing grenades at zombies. To address this, we added a low-resolution voxel field that could be sampled by the foliage shader to apply additional deformations. This low-resolution voxel field, which is about 1 cubic foot per voxel, is fixed in space and spans the entire habitat. For comparison, the voxel field that travels with the player is about 2 cubic inches per voxel. Enemies and grenades within this space can write motion trails and impacts into the low-resolution voxel field, which are ultimately interpreted by the foliage shader as wind forces. This is when preparation met opportunity. When grenades explode, they are creating localized hurricane force winds.
Russ, do you think the head crab could turn a gorilla into a zombie?
Honestly, if there's a gorilla on the loose, I'm not sure a head crab's gonna make it much worse.
Last cell. Yeah. What is it, Dad?
It doesn't look like they actually built the weapon. It's like they, I don't know, discovered something. Or maybe they uncovered it.
What do you mean?
If I'm reading this right, they tracked it to an old apartment building in the QZ, but instead of going in to get it, they grabbed the whole building and built a vault around it.
Holy crap. They must have been terrified of this thing.
I'm trying to figure out whether we ought to be.
Last one.
There were very few existing antlion sounds to work with coming into Half-Life Alyx, so unlike most of the familiar Half-Life creatures, which often had legacy sounds layered in, nearly all of the sounds for the antlions were completely new material. Starting with an almost blank canvas, we drew inspiration from the behavior of the antlions to inform their sound design. Since the antlions attack in waves, it seemed reasonable to us that they communicated and organized into groups for attack. This idea led us to incorporate complex insect-like clicking sounds, the final version of which began as recordings of European starlings, which turned out to provide more variation and character than insect recordings. Here you can hear the original European starling sounds. We took those recordings and layered them with designed elements to create the antlion sounds used in the game.
Last one. I'm out. 4 shells left.
In traditional games, analog controls like levers, dials, and crank wheels usually play simple animations in response to a player's mouse click or key press. In VR, however, players with tracked hand controllers expect to be able to control analog interfaces by grabbing and moving them directly. To support this, we developed a new system that we call Anim Interactables. The opening mechanism of this health station is a good example of an Anim Interactable. To your left and right, you can see some more examples, such as a large railroad switch, the Vortigaunt's fire alarm doorbell, a crank wheel, a rolling cabinet door, and both the antenna and tuning dial on the radio. Anim Interactables like these allow us to give the player control of analog interfaces while constraining their input to an authored range of motion. The system uses the position and orientation of the player's hand to drive the animation of a model which defines the analog interface. As the player moves their tracked controller, the Anim Interactable continuously performs a search to determine if playing the animation forward or backward will place the interaction point closer to the tracked controller's position in space. This allows the player to drag the animation forward, backward, or hold it stationary. The result is an intuitive correspondence between the player's body and the virtual interface. Furthermore, these interactive animations don't necessarily have to make physical sense. Artists simply animate the range of motion they want the player to be able to control. These Anim Interactables have their debug visualizations turned on, so you can see the authored range of motion, including the nonlinear paths used on the railroad switch, the health station, and the crank wheel. Anim Interactables allowed us to make all kinds of objects in the world interactive, from mundane man-made devices to intricate combine mechanisms, without the need to run complex physical simulations. Feel free to play around with the Anim Interactables in this area before moving on.
Alyx? Alyx!
Okay.
Copy that. Go on to Sound Dog, reporting all suspects.
What now?
What?
It's not a vault. It's a prison. They didn't build it to keep us out. They're trying to keep something in.
Keep what in?
I don't know. I'm not sure if this data part even knows. But they got something trapped in there.
Whoa. Okay. So if it's not a weapon, are we still doing this?
The way I see it, whatever's in there doesn't like the Combine very much. So we got that in common.
True.
So, are we still doing this?
We've come this far. I say we keep going. And if you find out it's something we really shouldn't mess with, we'll call it off.
That's my girl. I'll let you know what I find out.
Sometimes large chunks of a level are shifted around or reordered as we work on the game. That's the case for this entire area and the toner puzzle it's centered around. In fact, for much of its existence, this area didn't even have a home anywhere in the game. It was originally built just to help prototype the toner puzzle mechanic. Over the course of a few months, the raw gameplay mechanics of toner puzzles were developed and playtested in a series of small test levels. Each test level explored a single gameplay concept. Those were things like using the toner puzzle to draw the player's eyes to something interesting, such as Zen flora and fauna, creating moments of surprise when an enemy head crab popped out of a vent, or requiring the player to thread their arm and hand in behind pipes or other tight spaces. Once we figured out which of these ideas were working well, we combined them into a single test level with the toner puzzle that strung all these concepts together in one single puzzle. Further playtesting in this level made us confident that toner puzzles should be included in the game, and we started adding them into other areas. But we didn't include the test level itself anywhere in the game. It wasn't until later that it became apparent that the zoo was in need of a pace break. We pay careful attention to player fatigue when we playtest, and look for cases where a puzzle or some exploration and resource gathering can be used to give the player a break from combat. There was such a need toward the end of the zoo level, and thankfully in this case we were able to make use of the toner prototype level that had already been built.
When we decided to resurrect our toner prototype level for use as a pacing break in the zoo, we had the opportunity to make some improvements and integrate elements that hadn't existed when we had first experimented with the toner mechanic. For example, the newly developed explosive Zen bloaters were added at various points along the puzzle to surprise players and remind them that they need to keep an eye out for these hazards. Also, in the intervening months, the toner mechanic itself had evolved from one where players merely push a ball of energy along a path to one which included branching paths and rotating junctions. This junction here in the breaker box is the linchpin of the whole puzzle, as the player must interact with it 3 times, once to open the roller door to this back area, once to switch power away from the roller door to the last leg of the puzzle, and once to reopen the roller door in order to exit. Because this toner puzzle covers such a large physical area, including some zombie combat in the middle, players frequently lost track of the correspondence between the state of this junction and the roller door. This meant that they would trap themselves back here and not understand how to proceed. To address this, we made a lot of changes to the presentation of this junction over the course of development. The unique breaker box and tangle of conduit are designed to make the junction recognizable as the same junction from both sides of the wall. The shape of the hole in the wall and the orientation of the breaker box are designed to make sure that the player stands in the right location to have line of sight to the roller door and see that it closes when they route power away from it to the last leg of the puzzle. The door itself also makes a lot of noise and an unreasonable amount of sparks to draw attention to itself each time it moves. This particular puzzle twist was in danger of being cut for a long time, but with this series of refinements, enough playtesters understood its behavior that we were comfortable with shipping it in the final game. When we decided to resurrect our toner prototype level for use as a pacing break in the zoo, we had the opportunity to make some improvements and integrate elements that hadn't existed when we had first experimented with the toner mechanic. For example, the newly developed explosive Zen bloaters were added at various points along the puzzle to surprise players and remind them that they need to keep an eye out for these hazards. Also, in the intervening months, the toner mechanic itself had evolved from one where players merely push a ball of energy along a path to one which included branching paths and rotating junctions. This junction here in the breaker box is the linchpin of the whole puzzle, as the player must interact with it 3 times. Once to open the roller door to this back area, once to switch power away from the roller door to the last leg of the puzzle, and once to reopen the roller door in order to exit. Because this toner puzzle covers such a large physical area, including some zombie combat in the middle, players frequently lost track of the correspondence between the state of this junction and the roller door. This meant that they would trap themselves back here and not understand how to proceed. To address this, we made a lot of changes to the presentation of this junction over the course of development. The unique breaker box and tangle of conduit are designed to make the junction recognizable as the same junction from both sides of the wall. The shape of the hole in the wall and the orientation of the breaker box are designed to make sure that the player stands in the right location to have line of sight to the roller door and see that it closes when they route power away from it to the last leg of the puzzle. The door itself also makes a lot of noise and an unreasonable amount of sparks to draw attention to itself each time it moves. This particular puzzle twist was in danger of being cut for a long time, but with this series of refinements, enough playtesters understood its behavior that we were